Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronich, who's been covering the capital for over 30 years.
Probably more years than our guest is old. Our guest here is a return guest, Walter Mosley, Assemblyman, representing part of Crown Heights in Brooklyn and other communities as well. But welcome back to the Jewish View.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rabbi, for having me.
You know, you're a really dynamic and energetic Assemblyman, and I really admire what you've been doing and how you've been conducting yourself. I've been watching you. You're there 5 years already.
Yeah, it seems like it was yesterday, 5 years. You showed me an article earlier about when I first got elected. So time goes fast.
Well, you're still thin.
Yeah. I'm going to try to keep that.
You haven't gone to that many receptions.
No.
Well, you know, Mark says your district is in Crown Heights, which that's the headquarters of the Lubavitch movement, 770 Eastern Parkway. So it's not only the headquarters, but there's thousands of Lubavitcher Hasidim that you represent, and you know, I think you represent very well. One of the biggest issues, though, and probably all New York, but in Crown Heights I know because I have children living there, is just the rent is super high and the housing is super high. So you have any bills that maybe could help alleviate the situation?
Well, I'll talk about something that's probably a little bit more germane and pertinent in real time, Rabbi, is the building of the Bedford Union Armory, which you know, I've been talking with Rabbi Sperling and Rabbi Eli Cohen about how that particular project, which is supposed to bring about many units of affordable housing and low-income housing, but making sure that housing is reflective of the needs of the people who already live in Crown Heights. So we have a lot of families, big families, growing families, and many developers are looking to sell one-bedroom studios, 2 bedrooms, and we all know that's not conducive to a growing family. And we've been involved with negotiations along with my council member, Lori Cumbo, who's kind of the point on this project, dealing with making sure that we have 1, affordable housing, 2, low-income housing, and 3, low-income and affordable housing that's reflective in part of the communities in which we represent. And so to me, that's, you know, part of what we do is legislation, but I think the more germane and more important thing that we do, which happens almost in real time, is the development that takes place in our communities and how that's going to impact the neighborhoods we serve.
Well, one of the problems in Borough Park, at least, which is not your district, but it's still a large Jewish community in Brooklyn, in Borough Park, there's just no land for building, and they're having a real housing crunch in Borough Park. Is the same thing happening in Crown Heights, where there's really, that's why rents are so high, because there really is nothing that's available, so the price can go up? I mean, it's not a glut, you know.
Well, I think there are 2 things. One, obviously, they will find land, developers will find land, even when it's not available. They'll purchase properties,
tear it down
and build anew.
Right.
So we see this often, you know, on Eastern Park, where we have Rogers Avenue and Eastern Park, where we had several projects almost in succession along Rogers Avenue, where they're built. You know, they have multiple lots in which they're building, you know, housing. Some of it's affordable, but you know, what's affordable to the average, you know, Brooklynite who lives in North Crown Heights? You know, what's affordable to us is a family of 4 making 46, 47,000. But when you talk about the affordable component as it relates to what developers want, obviously they want far more, and they want to set a paradigm or a price index that is far beyond what we're seeing. And as a result, that has a rippling effect on other landlords to see what other, you know, developers are getting, and they say, maybe I can get the same because we're in the same neighborhood, we have the same amenities and the like. So clearly it does reverberate, and it's important for us that when we have a say-so in a particular project that has significant impact, like the Bedford Armory, like the Union Armory, that we make sure that we get what we need for our constituents.
And what is the just up to, because it was Bedford Armory was sold a year ago, even more than that. So I don't even know what the status is.
Well, it used to be owned by the state, and then the state transferred ownership several years ago when Marty Marker was still our senator.
That was more than several years ago.
Right, and it's been operated by the city. And this 2 years ago, an RFP was drafted and submitted, and RFP was awarded earlier this year, or I should say late last year. But with any RFP awardee, they understand that if the community has issues and concerns, that it's conducive for them to sit down to the tables, to the principals that are representing these constituents, both at the state, federal, and a local level, in an effort to, come up with an amicable solution where people feel like, okay, this is something that we can live with.
Do you own your own home, or do you rent an apartment? Or
I stay in subsidized housing. I live in Mitchell-Lama housing, which is a state subsidized program. It would be hard for me to believe that I could find a place suitable for my 2 kids, and my wife and myself to live in an effort to serve the district that I'm in.
Is it because you're only earning $80,000? I mean, I'm just asking.
Actually, that would give me $1 more. I only make $79,900
Well,
some odd dollars. But it's that plays a large part in it.
Because that's the complaint in a lot of for a lot of legislators in New York City, is that they're just not earning enough.
You're not earning enough, and obviously, as any parent, you want to save, for your college tuition. You want to save for your own retirement. You want to put money away just in case of an emergency or for a rainy day. So you want to do everything to be a responsible, citizen and to be a responsible provider and parent.
No, absolutely.
But at the same time, you understand that living in this city sometimes can be very challenging, to say the least.
Is it impertinent for me to ask, like, approximately what your rent might be? I mean, just to give an idea.
I'll just say it's reasonable given the fact that we are living in Mitchell-Lama housing.
Okay.
And it's decent, clean, affordable housing with great schools, great hospitals, great amenities that any
I asked somebody that if they had $1 million, he says that you can buy a garage for $1 million. I mean, it's it's incredible. And young families, or like you said, a decent wage you would expect you should be able to own a home. But that's what I'm saying. And I know from personal people that I go down to Crown Heights, and they're, like you say, jammed up in 2-bedroom apartments, and they have. And there's no way they're going to have $1.5 million.
I will be in Sullivan County for an event for a Jewish organization, OHEL.
Oh, really? When?
It's next Sunday. Their Extreme Challenge. So I go every year. And a lot of my constituents from North Crown Heights have moved to Sullivan County and Rockland County not because they wanted to leave the city, but they had to leave the city because they had to provide for their families in a responsible way. And living in a city, unfortunately, does not give you that opportunity.
Well, plus it strengthens a depressed county like Sullivan.
It does,
County,
but at the same
helps.
time, you never want to make a choice based upon the fact that you're unable to stay where you would prefer to stay.
Okay.
This is where your synagogue may be that you grew up in. This is where your family's from. This is where your health care.
Look, I grew up in Mill Basin, and I understand. I moved up here, and I saw what the prices were here. And my father was visiting one time and looked at my utility bill and said, "Since when do they bill you weekly?"
Right.
And I said,
That's
"No,
a
this is
monthly
monthly."
Yeah.
And he says, "That's a week for me," So the utilities, I mean, everything's just out of whack in New York City.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who are working 3 $100,000 a year jobs, in medicine.
Yeah.
And they're sending their kids to yeshiva, and they're finding it difficult.
Very difficult.
So I understand that. So how old are your kids?
2 and 10.
10 years old. So the Sebastian
It's 10, right?
10.
And
Okay.
my Allison is my daughter. She's 2.
2.
Oh, excellent.
Okay. So, well, I don't know if I had said this, but I wish you all the best having
appreciate
good
that.
health for your children. And
Thank you.
And
Thank
your
you.
wife is living in Brooklyn now, or is she
yeah,
still
but
in Miami?
No, she now works in Bergen County. So she stays in Bergen County during the week, but obviously she lives in Brooklyn.
Because she did work in Miami. When
Yeah,
I
she was
first got elected,
finishing
yeah.
her residency there. So
Okay,
so
what
yeah,
does she do?
She's in osteopathic medicine, so she does a lot of alternative rehabilitation work.
Okay,
So
very
a lot
nice.
of workers' comp stuff. So
All right, well, that's good. Okay, I just thought I'd ask. I
Thank
just
you,
wanted to
thank
get
you. Thanks for
people to
asking.
get to know you,
yeah.
Talking about gun violence, maybe?
Well, I want to talk to him about the budget also, because the Jewish community got a lot in this budget. And can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, it was a late budget,
Yeah.
but I think that it was a timely budget in the sense that we got what the people wanted for the most part. Particularly policy initiatives that are germane to the people who live in Brooklyn, in particular, in the city. I know that some legislation that I was pushing in terms of the immunization money, that was my bill. It found its way into the budget, so I'm very pleased about that. I know that a lot of my constituents from the Jewish community was really pushing that immunization bill.
What does that mean?
Well, it reduces the cost of immunization.
Of what types of immunization?
These are very complicated, very high, costly immunizations.
No, but is it like for the flu, or is it immunizations for pneumonia? I mean,
all types. It varies. And
chicken pox, or
yeah.
all the whole gamut. Okay,
Right.
I didn't know.
But because I have constituents who have large families, and you're talking about immunization.
$30 a shot.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
Yeah. So this bill.
This bill offsets some of that cost.
Okay.
So we're very pleased to have that, but obviously the $2.5 billion we were able to put in for affordable and supportive housing, $2.5 billion we were able to put in for ensuring that our water infrastructure was up to par.
So $25 million was put in for security for nonprofit organizations. That was an important thing.
I forgot whose bill that was, but I know it was a bill that came out of our house that was incorporated into the budget. So there was a lot of, there were a lot of things, obviously raise the age and other things that got a lot of the publicity, but there was a lot of other bills that got incorporated into the budget.
Right, which is why I wanted to talk to you about those things, because everyone knows about what made the headlines.
Right.
I know there's, it's, what was it, $152 billion or?
153.6.
Billion there, right.
Yeah. I'm off by a little bit on his salary, I'm off a little bit on the budget.
That's all right, you're in the ballpark.
Okay, but that's a lot.
It is.
Because I remember I don't even think when I first started, I don't think we were even at $1 billion in the budget.
When you talk about a budget of that size, but 70% of that budget is taken up by education and health. And so you're talking about 30% of $153 billion.
Right.
So you're talking about not a lot of money, but there are a lot of priorities I think that were met that will serve a number of communities throughout the state of New York.
And you chair the subcommittee on regulated mortgage lenders, and you also had a bill that had to deal with that, a major bill that had to deal with the Mortgage Lender Act or something.
These are that's a bill that would provide the necessary notification to a homeowner who is under a foreclosure proceeding, understanding their rights.
The Mortgage Bill of Rights.
Right. And understanding where they are along the path of going through this
Was that part
process.
of this budget?
No, it didn't get into the budget, but as one of my signature bills as that chair of that subcommittee.
And it could be this year that
it could be. It's something that we have to evaluate and see if I don't know if off the top of my head I don't know if it has a Senate sponsor or not. Because I have a number of bills, but. We'll see if it's a priority of ours to push this session, or if we just wait and get a Senate sponsor over the summer.
Well, something else you're pushing this year is gun violence prevention.
Today's gun violence prevention.
Tell us about it.
I mean, who could be against preventing gun violence? Who could be for gun violence? If you're not for preventing it, are you for it?
Well, today's Gun Violence Awareness Day today in Albany, and
we're not aware enough.
And
there are people to be aware of.
There are people who understand that their sole objective is to try to overturn major provisions within the New York SAFE Act, which was passed in 2013. But in light of everything that has taken place this past November, with the NRA just holding its national convention in Atlanta last week, we saw that, and I think I said this at the press conference about the issue of reciprocity, where people can apply the state laws from where they're living and apply them to states like New York. So if I live in a state, let's say Texas, it's concealed carry laws, which allows me to lawfully carry, or if I'm mentally ill, or if I have a propensity for domestic violence and I've been convicted.
Right. Yeah, I know.
And I can still carry in Texas, that reciprocity would allow for me to do the same thing in the state of New York, even
Yeah,
though
it's
I
a
might
law.
not be legally
Yeah.
able to do so
If
currently
you-
in New York State
You know
if I
what's-
was a
That's
resident
a
of New York
law,
State.
I mean, so what is that?
Well, what they want to do is they
wanna
want to
make a law,
advocate
yeah.
for that at the federal level in an effort to make that reciprocity law.
Got it, and you were against that, that's
Oh,
what I
obviously,
mean.
yeah.
What really bothered me was the fact that people who have committed these violent acts serve time in jail. The idea that they could still come out of jail as a felon and apply for a gun permit
Yeah.
and get approved by a judge
Where's
is
that?
outrageous in New York.
Really? I didn't
Is
even know that.
outrageous.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
It's
what
still-
I
yeah.
took out of the news conference, that I didn't realize that that was still possible. I thought if you're a convicted felon, you can't own a gun, but you can in New York State.
You talking about for the reciprocity laws?
No, you're just talking.
No, I'm talking about reciprocity laws in terms of,
I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Right.
I moved on from that.
Okay,
It's a
all right.
new paragraph.
All right.
No, but I just wanted to ask you, at the news conference,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were saying about the domestic violence and the hate crimes,
right.
that you could, someone who was convicted of a hate crime could still could still own a gun, legally own a gun. Isn't that what they were saying?
Well, I remember I came to the press
Late?
conference late,
Okay.
remember? So I came towards like the middle
But
of
I
the
thought
end.
that was part of it, where they were talking about hate. Were you there? You weren't there for the
No, I
hate
was
crime
not there for
discussion?
that.
Okay.
No.
So they were saying that with hate crimes and domestic violence, that you could still own a gun if you were convicted of a hate crime or domestic violence, that when you get out of jail, that, they don't want that this group of legislators are trying to prevent that from happening.
The group of legislators at the press conference?
Yes, yes.
That they're trying to prevent.
Prevent hate crime convicts and domestic violence convicts from owning
Well,
a gun.
the one thing that we always look at, and I'm a part of a group that works on
Yeah.
gun violence year round, is that we understand that, and in particular this bill, the SAFE Act, it wasn't a perfect bill, but it's a bill that we continue to amend, continue to make changes to, we continue to review in an effort to make sure that it's meeting the needs and desires of the people who live in the state of New York today. And we've had a multitude of amendments. And we've had a multitude of amendments on both sides of the aisles that have been brought up, and some of them have been acted upon, some of them have not. But we understand that this is a comprehensive piece of legislation or law now, and we understand that it's a growing, organic piece of policy
course, yeah.
that will always need constant review because technology is continuing to change, innovation continues to change. So
What about the microstamping?
that's the issue that
Casings,
I remember.
shell casings.
I think Senator, at that time, Senator Eric Adams had brought, that was one of his bills.
Right, now Ellen Jaffe's carrying it.
And it is a bill, again, there's certain bills that we would love to pass in the Assembly that would apply to the SAFE Act
But is that-
indirectly, but, the SAFE Act was something that the governor, kind of
Right.
championed.
Yeah.
And we had willing participants, obviously, then
No,
Sheldon
but
Silver.
what I'm asking is that this package of bills,
Most of them we'll pass them out of our house.
right, but is it to amend the SAFE Act?
Some of them are, some of them standalone.
Some are standalone,
Right.
right. And I thought the microstamping was the standalone.
It probably is because it doesn't have to do with the possession of a gun. It has to do with the microstamping of shell casings.
Right. Okay, here's something I didn't know about you that I found out about. That you served as a special advisor and external relations specialist for the New York State Senate Minority Conference.
Right.
And that you were senior advisor to the Assembly's deputy speaker.
Right.
So who was the Assembly's deputy speaker? Was that Arthur Eve? Or-
No, that was Clarence Norman.
Oh, he was after, okay. That was after Arthur Eve, right?
I presume so, yeah.
Okay, you assume so? Why, you're not that
No,
old?
I didn't. I knew Arthur held positions, but I didn't
Okay.
memorize his position.
So that was under Clarence Norman?
Correct.
Okay. And in the Senate Minority Conference?
John Sampson.
Oh, okay. All right, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I no idea. So you actually had some idea of the inner workings of the legislature before you got elected?
Certainly.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I don't know how many other people in your district know about that, but, you know, I thought I'd bring it out as a little trivia.
Enough,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay, enough, okay. You don't want any additional people to know. Okay, one other thing, raise the age. Were you a big supporter of raise the age?
Tremendous support of it.
Why is it? Why?
One, it's kind of, I know we celebrated it, but I think it's shameful that New York is the next to last state to be treating 16 and 17-year-olds as adults when they should be treated as children, you know?
Because their brains are not?
Well, you
not
know,
mature
if you
enough?
think about what you did as a 16 to 17-year-old and some of the things that you got yourself into, obviously, you know, you will want to be treated, you know, fairly. And this does not make us say that, you know, we don't recognize that 16 to 17-year-olds, just like a 17 to 18-year-old, can commit a violent crime. But for those who did not commit a violent crime, did not commit a crime using a gun, did not commit a crime with a sexual orientation to it, that those individuals should not be adjudicated as an adult. They should be given an opportunity to get the resources, to put them on a path of not going to a jail manned by men for men, but putting them on a path where we have a particular youth part within criminal court in an effort to make sure that they pay their debt to society, but we don't want that debt to become a burden for the rest of their lives. And that's what we've seen in so many people who have been adjudicated as adults.
So what's with, you know, 16-year-olds that make that age, because such a turning point in someone's life, because you have a bill that you'd want to see 16-year-olds be able to register to vote. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just saying, you know, 16-year-olds, if they commit a crime, you say that they should be handled more gently than a hardened criminal. They shouldn't be on that path to interact with more hardened criminals, and I understand that part. But they're also intelligent enough to choose who to vote for.
Well, remember, we're not talking about a huge number of 16 to 17-year-olds statewide. I think, I don't know, the four categories that we are looking at in terms of defining if a child goes to a youth part or criminal court is at the most like 800 crimes annually, roughly. Okay. So, you know, to me, you know, obviously we can't punish all 16 and 17-year-olds because a small fraction has, you know, broken the law and run astray. But I do believe that 16 and 17-year-olds have the capacity to learn and capacity to understand, you know, who's representing them.
I just think, you know, I mean, just one of the things that one of my 10 jobs is I have prison visitation. And, you know, unfortunately, and really it's open society, so it's not only Jews, really. There are minority people who want to find out for Judaism for different reasons. Right. But, you know, I'm open to everybody, and of course I could talk to everybody. And, you know, I'm trying to help as much as I can. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but, you know, I'm just a person determined to do what God wants and do the right thing and straighten yourself out. You don't want to end up in your whole life in this, you know, these cages, which they are. But you're right. The truth of the matter is some people, you know, they're into drugs. You know, like you say, they're wild. And then it's so vicious because that the drugs hook you. It's not like, you know, it gets to a point where it's not like, oh, I want to take a drug. It's like you have to take a drug. And these people, you know, they don't belong in jail at all. They're not getting the help that they need.
And remember, you know, a large part of this bill allows us to integrate not only Department of Correction, you know, personnel, but Office of Children and Family Services, and all that they have to offer. And in the city, it will be ACS. So and everything that they're supposed to give to the young people, as opposed to just exposing them to Department of Corrections and what limited resources they have.
Don't get me started on ACS. I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you. You had going back to the gun issue. You had a personal story that you really didn't get into at the news conference you started to. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, it's just, you know, I think the vast majority of people who live in the city, unfortunately, can probably indirectly or directly talk about an experience of gun violence. And in my family, we're no different than any other Brooklynite. And my mom's only brother, you know, was shot several times in Brooklyn, in central Brooklyn. And unfortunately, was paralyzed and blind, and lived like that for like 20, 25 years. And after that, unfortunately succumbed to those
Succumbed to
wounds.
that.
So that's my testimony in terms of how gun
And
violence has touched our lives.
this was your uncle?
This is my uncle.
Okay, so how old was he and how long?
I want to say he was in his early to mid 50s when he passed away.
So young.
Yeah.
And how long ago was this?
Well, he passed away several years ago, but he was in his early 20s, mid 20s when he was shot.
I'm so sorry, but I just wanted to hear what that story was, and I know it's never easy.
Yeah, we're
to talk
legislators,
about.
but we were first Brooklynites,
That's right.
So
Well,
we've experienced many of the ills that people unfortunately still experience today.
Well, I'm glad you shared that with us. Thank you.
No problem.
I wanted to ask you about the Jewish culture in the legislature. Has it changed much in the past few years? Have you seen the same level of interest and attendance at Jewish functions like Tu B'Shvat and the Passover and the Rebbe's Lubavitcher Rebbe's birthday?
Well, obviously we can anticipate things are going to change with the change in leadership. But for me, it was never about who was there or who wasn't there. It's my constituents, I think will want me to be there. Yeah. I try not to keep score on what other people are doing. I have some great friends who happen to be Jewish. Neely Rosick, Chuck Levine, Phil Goldfeder before he left, and these are just good people. Regardless of where they hail from. But members get busy with other things. But I always try to make that a priority.
Well, the Rebbe's birthday celebration, I remember the room was pretty much packed under the previous assembly leadership, and there were people, I guess, legislators who wanted to be there to show their respect to the Rebbe in front of the assembly speaker also.
But then you got to ask yourself, were they showing their respect to Shelley, or were they showing their respect to the
Rebbe?
To the Rebbe?
Right. And now you see the real shakeout, so to speak, when you have the same type of celebration in a room, the same room, and it's sparsely populated. And I know you don't do a head count. I know that this is something maybe I do too much of, but I remember last year it was in the terrace level of the LOB. That wasn't that well attended. They moved it back this year to the parlor. Right. But I just wanted to sort of get your thoughts on.
Yeah, what? It's one of those things where you hope that a brand new group of legislators get a better understanding of why it's important to have these type of relationships. Not just because of who you represent or what part of the state you're from, but understanding that if I can empathize and sympathize with your plight, then you can do the same with my plight. And I think that we are a stronger state for it.
The Tu B'Shvat ceremony, I was sad in that, I got there late and there was a tray of carob and other dried figs and, just still wrapped. And I didn't even know if I should open it. And they said, oh, no, they want you to open it. But it was like there was no one around. It was just a sad scene. And I just look at that and I think that, there needs to be someone else, really organizing.
But also remember, there are a lot of Jewish legislators who now have moved on to
that's right
to greater responsibilities.
That's true.
So, and just like within the African American, Black Caucus, we have more members of the caucus who have moved on to bigger and better things, so they can't attend things like they used to.
But you're replacing when the Black legislators move on to the city council or to some other office, borough president, whatever, it's that person being replaced by another Black legislator. Now it's not being, the seats are not being replaced by another Jewish legislator in all cases. Right. I mean, when Phil Goldfeder left, Stacey Pfeffer Amato she says she's a Jewish legislator, but she's married, she doesn't, her family's not being brought up Jewish, is, it replaced him. So,
Right.
but there's all sorts of other examples,
Yeah, yeah.
Carl Kruger seat.
Rhoda Jacobs
Rhoda
seat.
Jacobs seat, yeah,
Shelley Silver seat.
okay.
Yeah, so.
Well, the main
And I
thing
just
is
look at
just a
that change.
person can really, you're a perfect example
Yeah.
that you're not Jewish, but you represent very well the Jewish community in Crown Heights. So you don't have to be Jewish to be,
Exactly.
to be helpful to the Jewish
Now, if
community.
Chuck Levine leaves,
Yeah.
because he's running for Nassau County Executive,
I think his son is looking at running for that.
and what about, who would head up the Jewish Legislators Association?
I don't know, there would have to be a vote.
There'd have to be a vote.
Yeah.
Because on your website, when you talk about the different groups and the different committees, you don't have that you're a member of the Jewish legislators.
Well, technically, this is the first year where they actually have put me on the roster. I didn't even know I was on it, to be honest.
Okay.
Until Chuck showed it to me, and I was like, oh, okay.
Well, now you got to put it on your website.
I do.
And I've been telling all the legislators who come across my path to remember it's just not the Black and Puerto Rican Asian
No.
Caucus, it's also the Jewish Legislators Association.
Yeah,
Someone should know it exists.
Right.
All right, you know what, Mark, we're out of time, but I want to thank
We're out
the
of
Assemblyman
time.
for your yearly visit, your
Thank
annual
you.
visit, and
Thank you, Rabbi.
your report card got A+ for representing the good people of Crown Heights,
Thank
and
you.
just continue with success and good health.
I appreciate it. Same to
Much
you.
continued success. I really admire what you do in the
Thanks,
Assembly.
Mark. I really
Keep
appreciate
up the
it.
good work.
Thank you.